What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Disciples of Ed. We're the Always Mr. Podcast Network. We come to you a little bit after the Flyers shootout up in Buffalo, seemingly recovered from that last COVID-19 accident they had out at Tahoe. Two straight wins up in Buffalo. I'm your host, tonight by the one, the only Mr. Podcast himself, Joe Borg. How you doing, Borg?
Doing good, Rob. Always excited to talk some Flyers hockey and maybe some Phantoms hockey tonight, and especially excited after two freaking shutouts in a row, one by Moose and the other by Couturier. So, doing some good things and doing some great things. Enjoyed podcasting. It's not work when you love it, so definitely excited to talk some more hockey.
And we're also joined by the man who's pretty much a Flyers encyclopedia, and Steve. How you doing, Steve?
Doing pretty well. How about you?
Doing just fine. Obviously a lot better coming off those two wins up in Buffalo. A lot better than we were the last time around. And now that the Flyers have gotten a little bit healthier, they're getting another guy back tonight in Travis Konechny, a big piece. Coming off the back-to-back shutouts, Carter Hart, after getting shelled out of Tahoe, got himself right last time out with the shutout up in Buffalo. Brian Elliott also with the shutout in the first game of that series. And guys, and Steve, we'll start with you. How important was it for the Flyers to go up to Buffalo and get themselves back on track up there?
Given how they played, near not really perfect, but just to play so well, with everybody finally back, fully healthy tonight, with Konechny coming back, but with everybody able to really, we finally had Giroux and Couturier back together for a good string of games here, and it just shows that when this team's healthy, that they can easily handle these kind of a lesser team in Buffalo. And for it to get shutouts, especially for Carter Hart in the most recent game, to bounce back from Tahoe, it's good for him. Hopefully he can get past his Bruins night terrors and continue to just be this star goalie we know he can be.
Yeah, and it wasn't the easiest shutout ever. What was it? I think 28 saves, I want to say, the other day.
Yeah,
something like that,
28,
yeah.
And,
28.
Moose was 23, if I remember this correctly, I think.
Well, when Moose was out, not to discredit him, a shutout's always a great thing, but Buffalo wasn't exactly competitive in the offensive end in that first game of the series. The second game, they had a little bit more juice, and they were able to create some more good scoring opportunities, and Carter Hart was up to the challenge for each and every one of them. So yeah, that's a big thing for him to be able to get back. We know how good he is. We know how talented he is. The Bruins have kind of been in his head a little bit this year. So for him to come back from that rough game against Boston with a shutout against a lesser team in Buffalo, I think that's going to be a big thing, especially going forward into these next three games out west in Pittsburgh. So really nice to see him go out there and perform well, and nice to see they finally had back-to-back games with a shots advantage, had back-to-back games with a scoring chance advantage. And yeah, it's against Buffalo, and Buffalo sucks, but it was really nice to see them finally look like the Flyers that we grew accustomed to seeing throughout the better part of last season. Bork, what's your takeaway on that?
I think it's just great to see them come in and take advantage, because in the past we've obviously seen our Flyers sometimes play down to lesser opponents, where you did not see that in this series. Like you said, Rob, I fully agree with you. In the first game, it was pretty non-competitive, but the couple blunders that you still mix in on Saturday's game, Elliott was able to step up and make the save. Then Sunday, Hart did make those saves, 28 of 28, but we were still able to get 38 shots after a 39-shot performance on net. So they've been getting the shots on net. I've loved the aggression I've seen from all four lines, and AV pointed it out. You were able to actually run all four lines, where he hasn't felt he's been able to do that in every game this far, just do off a play, where being able to actually do that coming into Pittsburgh, you should actually be able to do that against the Pens too, because let's be honest, after their first two lines, they really don't got shit other than the fact that Teddy Bluger has 11 points. Brandon Tanev only scores against us, it seems, because he has 7 points total, and I think about 3 or 4 of them might be in games against us. But like the thing is, Pittsburgh, they suck in their bottom 6, where the Flyers have very good lines throughout, and I saw them play great against Buffalo, and I think that's going to be a key to beating Pittsburgh as well in this 3-game series. The fact that you have a great 4 lines, and Pittsburgh and Buffalo do not have that. All they have is a top 6. And I love how all 4 lines played, and now they're even stronger with TK back. Don't know why you took Knack out, but with TK back, they are stronger.
Borg, you mentioned something in the group chat that we had leading up to today's show, and that is the play of Shane Gostisbehere. And it really showed he ended up with a 2-game goal streak, which is really nice, his first couple of the season, and just some more improved play from him over what we had seen earlier on in the season. What are your thoughts on Ghost's play of late?
Yeah, it seems like he just has his skates back under him. Like, they talked about his health and everything, and then obviously coming back from injury, it takes you a bit to really get in a groove. Well, now it seems like he's back in that groove. He's always looked quicker this year. It seems like that Provorov and Ghost pairing, it keeps moving up when you look at defensive numbers. They're doing pretty well, and they're getting better over time. I've really liked what I've seen from Ghost, and now have been able to see him kind of go back to his 17 self, shadowing that form again, being able to contribute in the zone, and knowing Provy has always got your back, no matter what he has to do in that facet. So I've liked everything I've seen from Ghost of late, and really this season in general, working his way back. I think he's shown nice, steady progression, and has only had about 2 games that stand out to me where he didn't really do anything in, where I can point to Hag and Braun and others a lot more when it comes to that standpoint. So I've been very much impressed with him, and I'm sure Steve would agree, being a Ghost lover as well. So
absolutely.
Take it away, Steve.
Everything Borg said, yeah. Ghost has been pretty sound defensively. Really getting reaccustomed to working with Provorov. They seem to be finding that chemistry that they showed before a couple of years ago. And he's also seemed to mesh pretty well with Gustafsson on the power play, considering that's Gustafsson's only strength is the power play. But, they're able to cycle and rotate with each other to really get a good opening for a shot that will hopefully be tipped by JVR. But it's good to see, they're getting on net more, which I know was one of your complaints either earlier in the season or just in general with Ghost, because you have plenty of them. But
I did have plenty. Not wrong about that.
He's just looks solid, and looks like you start to think about like what you could either get for him in the off season, or if you really think about maybe trying to keep him for the long run of his contract, because if he continues to play like he has been, then he should be here to stay, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I
credit
agree.
where it's due. I'm sorry, go ahead, Borg.
I was just going to say I agree with Steve real quick on the fact of, if he keeps playing how he's playing, he's not a UFA until 2023. I think you got to keep a guy where, I know plus minus isn't everything, but I don't feel like boring people with some defensive grade numbers where a +8 for Provy and a +7 for Ghost. When you look at the other numbers, that has them graded pretty good, and it keeps getting better as Ghost's play has progressed. So I completely agree with Steve. If it keeps progressing, one, you're going to see less and less of Gus. If Braun keeps looking good with Sanheim and so on and so forth, Myers with a Hag. But it's also going to allow us to have much more depth in the defense than we thought coming in, because if Gus doesn't pan out, it's kind of just like saying, okay, now we just have the dudes we knew we were going to have, and the guy that we added has just kind of become obsolete. So you basically just didn't add anybody at that point. That's all that would become. Where if he can produce, like Steve hinted out on the power play still, then you at least have a little something there. So it depends what he can do, but when it comes to Ghost, you got to keep him around. He is a guy just similar to a forward we'll probably get to later. Everyone's going, oh, we can let him go in expansion. Well, he can be expendable. To now it's like, holy shit, we cannot let this guy go anywhere. So it's nice to see how life changes and how stuff changes in a span of a couple months in sports. But I would say now he's a guy you have to hold on to. He averages only the one of three defensemen on the team that average over 20 minutes. The other two are obviously Provy is one, and then Sanheim's the other. Myers averages just over 19. So
yeah, I'm not saying like he should be a lock to like really work on keeping, but I think it does help his value kind of like go back to where it was before, these injuries and his slumps really hit. So if he can raise his value to maybe where you're saying, okay, maybe Seattle doesn't necessarily want to take him, or you think that Seattle's going to take a defenseman from another team, then you could try to work Ghost to them and try to get like a higher draft pick value or a better prospect, or just a kind of a player that needs a change of scenery as well, but of a higher regard than what we would be potentially getting, a month ago.
Yeah, the Flyers are going to have a decision to make here, and the way the Ghost has performed over these past few games, it's kind of starting to force the issue with that. And it comes at a good time, too, because as we had mentioned in previous shows, the Flyers have been struggling defensively. That had probably been their biggest drawback all season. So for him to kind of get going and to perform up to the level that he once was a few years ago, and it kind of adds some really much needed stability to the defensive end of things. And if they can get that, if they can shore up that defense and Ghost can be a part of it, I mean, as critical as I've been of him, he has played well lately. And if he can continue to do that, that's a huge thing for the Flyers moving forward, especially as they start to face some of these tougher teams as the schedule goes along a little bit. So, yeah, that's a big thing. It's really good to see him performing well. I will happily eat my words if he continues to do so.
Good.
Ghost is performing great when Rob Foley has his back.
Oh, yeah.
It's about damn time.
And now we just need to get Gus to start making Stevie his words, and then all will be well.
I'll always praise him on the power play. Everything else has been shit.
Yeah, well, that's a very accurate statement. Boric, you mentioned, as you're talking, you mentioned JVR, and I just wanted to point out to everybody, everyone's probably realized it by now, but the guy has 12 out of his last 14 games, he's got a point in 12 of the last 14. This guy has been excellent all season long, and he's got a number of multi-point games, including a 4-assist game in there, and that kind of begs the question for me, and Steve, I'll start with you this time. Are you starting to buy in that this is the JVR that we could have for the whole season, or do you still think it's kind of just a flash in the pan?
Oh, I'm so hesitant because every time I'm like ready for him to just go back to his inevitable cold streak, he just doesn't. So I guess I have to buy in for the shortened season of all seasons for JVR.
Yeah. Fair enough.
It's really going to make Seattle think about getting them.
Yeah, he's definitely he's piquing their interest, to say the least. Boric, what's your thoughts on this? Do you think that he's going to be able to maintain this play?
It's definitely going to be interesting to see because JVR always has been, as I know Steve described in the last podcast, like a streaky player that has very good fiery moments and then has very, very cold ice level moments. So, but this year he's been going steady all season, and I know when listening to the different interviews and stuff, the coaching staff talked about how great he's been coachability-wise. This has been his best defensive season, where you have seen him buy into the whole let's have our defense from the forward position lead to our offense, where they've actually got mad at other guys like Patrick Hayes, even defensively, not offensively, he's doing great, on not having that be as consistent this year. But when it comes to JVR, it's basically been smooth sailing. AV's just been all complimentary of him. And I think due to that and the fact that he's buying in and mentoring and teaching everyone else now, I think I am going to buy in and say he's going to keep this going because all the signs point in the right direction. He looks great with Farabee and Couturier. That's a very good line in the league right now and is graded very highly. So I think everything put together, I think he's going to continue this success and have one of his best seasons, oddly enough, in a shortened 56-gamer. So
if you consider that a shortened 56-game season, I think he could already consider this one of his best seasons. Statistically, he's been that good so far. But he's going to need to continue because, as we said, the schedule gets a little bit tougher. They have the 3 games with Pittsburgh coming up. Now, Pittsburgh, a team that is 2 points behind the Flyers in the standings, and they've also played 2 more games. They are a -5 in goal differential. Not quite the Penguins team that we've gotten used to seeing over the years with Crosby and Malkin. As you mentioned, their top 6, pretty solid. After that, really not a whole lot. Question marks between the pipes for them, question marks on the defensive side for them as well. This is a team that the Flyers had a lot of success against in the opening 2 games of the season, scored 11 goals combined over those 2 games, albeit they were outshot in both games. So, Borg, do you think that if the Flyers can continue to play the way they did against Buffalo and kind of control the play a little bit, that they could have a lot of success against this Penguins team in these 3 games?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest key, where you have to keep playing, cycling your 4 lines, like I mentioned, with the aggressive shot-first mentality and not the crazy opportunist, old-school Dallas Stars-esque mentality when they had Montgomery down there, whatever the hell his name was. So I really like what I've seen of late. If you keep that up against Pittsburgh, you hit the nail on the head, Rob. Their goaltending has been struggling mightily. Yari went from stepping up to being regarded as a guy that they thought could take the torch as their next goalie to now having a 3.14 goals against and an 8.94 save percentage, some of the lower grades in the league when it comes to a guy that's starting. And DeSmith has a terrible save percentage at an 8.93, a decent goals against. So Yari, if you can pepper him, you should be able to score, and their defense is nothing special. Like you said, I think Olivier Joseph might be out again, and then they have other guys that are out of the lineup as well. Yannick Weber, whoever's in of him, or Ruedel is nothing special. Matheson, ever since he got paid by Florida, has been league average at best, and that's being generous. And Peterson is terrible this year, honestly, for Pittsburgh. So their defense has taken a step back, especially when that Joseph kid's not in, which I don't know why he's not in tonight, quite honestly. But it looks like from the projections he's not looking at this. If he is, then that would help them. I think you just got to keep peppering them and staying aggressive, like you said, and that's how you're going to beat this team. And it would be more impressive to get that actually on Pittsburgh, because even though they don't have the same defense, they are ranked 8th in terms of shots on goal allowed. They usually only allow around 29, where the Flyers have been getting in the mid to high 30s of late. So it would be more impressive if you're able to do that against Pittsburgh than against Buffalo and show that same mentality. So that's why I think having Crosby out, obviously from a hockey sense, you wish him well with COVID to get well, but with a hockey sense, it's very beneficial to show that aggression and make their lines even weaker in Pittsburgh when they were already not nearly as depth heavy as the Flyers.
Yeah, it's a good point that you bring up about Crosby being out. And since the Flyers had their COVID absences, they kind of, I guess, caught a string of good luck, if you will, in terms of Jack Eichel with his injury not being around this past weekend. And now they won't be facing Crosby. So I guess things are kind of evening out there. Not that we want to see anybody get injured or deal with COVID. We obviously wish them both very well in their recoveries, but things starting to even out in that regard, at least. And yeah, I think that the Flyers.
Well, with Eichel, Rob, real quick, it was impressive because he came back Sunday and we still wiped the floor with their power play when we gave them too many chances, which is the only good thing about Buffalo's team, their power play. Other than that, everything else sucks when you look at their grades in the league, but their power plays first, and you still wipe the floor with them. I thought that was honestly something that was the most impressive from the Buffalo series as well.
We did. I will say that he did still look not 100% when he is out there on Sunday, especially trying to quarterback that power play. He looked a little bit more hesitant and not quite as aggressive as he normally is, so probably still hampered a little bit by that injury. But anyway, the Flyers moving forward don't have to face Crosby in these next 3 games, which obviously is a huge thing because we all know how he's killed the Flyers over the course of his career. He's been the biggest thorn in the side for the Flyers out of anybody on the Penguins roster. They've done a fairly decent job of holding Evgeny Malkin in check over the course of the year, so it's really been Crosby who's done the lion's share of the damage. So for him to be out of the lineup, that's a big loss for Pittsburgh and should make life a heck of a lot easier for the Flyers. But, Pittsburgh is still a very formidable team, so the Flyers have to take these 3 games seriously and put their best foot forward if they want to succeed in these games. Steve, what's your takeaway from this upcoming 3-game series?
Well, hopefully they don't cancel any, with the Golden Child having being on the COVID list. But I think without Crosby, again, he's still the best, probably all-around player in the league, which is tough to say when we have Sean Couturier. But with Crosby being out, now you could just focus Couturier on Malkin's line and then let Hayes take whoever's trying to fill in for Crosby. And I think our talent trumps their talent, as Borg kind of alluded to. And we should... No Sidney Crosby makes me think that we should be able to handle them, but it's Pittsburgh, so we'll still, we'll have some scares throughout the game. But
how we
I
do
really
against
think
these guys if they call up and are playing their first career NHL game. They always have a field day against us.
Yeah, especially goaltenders, but we won't have to deal with that. But I think I'm expecting to go at least 2-1. But it's also the Flyers have been able to just pull out wins against everyone outside of Boston.
Yeah, it's really amazing how
Buffalo,
well they've done against.
That outlier of a Buffalo game is the only one we've lost in regulation that wasn't against Boston. So that's where I think no Crosby, we should be able to handle them, not entirely too easily, but I'm saying they should win these games. I would say go 3-0 if Crosby's not there and these games aren't delayed. But the last time one of us tried to predict a sweep, we got swept, and that was you, Rob, with Boston. So hopefully I'm not the jinx this time.
Okay, so I'll let you
good point,
be the one to make the predictions there. I will keep my mouth shut. I'm not going to say how many of these 3 games they will win, because as you just alluded to last time I did that, it didn't end very well. Yeah, I'm equally confident going into these games, though. I think that, obviously Crosby being out makes it that much easier for the Flyers defense to focus on shutting down the other guys in Pittsburgh's top 6. And if you can shut down the remainder of the top 6, the bottom 6, as Bork mentioned, is not that great. They shouldn't be that much of a threat offensively. But we've seen it over the years, though, that some of these no-name players with the Penguins have had success against the Flyers. We saw it in that playoff series back in 2018, I believe it was, where some of their bottom 6 guys really were the difference makers in that series. So you still got to focus on shutting them down, but life just got a hell of a lot easier without 87 in the lineup out there. That is for certain. Big games, though, because while the Flyers have 2 games in hand on Pittsburgh, they're only 2 points ahead of them. So if the Flyers can gain some much-needed ground, I think that would be really big.
I agree.
Steve, you sound like you're going to say something.
Has Mark Friedman played a game for them yet? Because if he hasn't, he's going to score against us.
Yeah,
I can feel that in my bones if he's with their if he's not on their taxi squad.
He's on the scratches right now.
He's definitely getting a game against us.
Lineup projections, yeah.
He's definitely getting a game against us then.
So as of right now, the Penguins have given him the same respect that the Flyers gave him, which is just not playing him.
Well, they probably want him to learn the system, but you're not entirely.
Yeah, I feel like they might put him in because I would say Friedman's honestly better than Chad Ruhwedel, for example. So
he's better than half their guys
there. Matheson is doing all right if you look at his surface numbers, but in general is just not that great. And then Peterson took a step back. So yeah, I feel like there's a great chance, like Steve said, he'll probably get in the lineup at some particular time. I don't know when, but I think they're putting him in one of these 3 games, and the latest will be by Saturday. But yeah, he'll probably get in because of the familiarity against us, which is the only time a struggling New Tavara in comparison when it came to Florida got put in on the Panthers when they played Columbus. So usually you're just putting guys for familiarity factor sometimes.
Makes sense. It's like the NFL signing the 3rd, 4th string quarterback to their practice squad.
It's also not surprising that he ended up going there, given Hextall's familiarity with him. I think that had a lot to do with it. That Hextall, obviously knowing Mark Friedman and what he can do very well during their time here in the Flyers organization. So no surprise that Hextall wanted to bring him in out there in Pittsburgh. Obviously, he sees something in him that the Penguins could utilize to their advantage hopefully they don't realize that until after they're done 3 games with the Flyers here.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised the Flyers took that risk, just knowing you have Hexie as a GM again. You had to know that writing was pretty much on the wall with that, but it is what it is. That's all I have to say about it at this point. I don't want to go into it, but it is what it is. I'm just surprised they took that risk knowing that.
It was the stupidest waiver move the Flyers have made since the infamous gauging trade interest by waiving Andreas Nodal by Paul Holmgren.
Oof. Yeah,
one knew he was going to be
many
a
bad moves
pick.
by Homer.
But this one you were hoping to slide him by, forgetting who's running Pittsburgh now. But again, it is what it is. I wish him well, but outside of Pittsburgh.
Well, speaking of bad moves by Homer, there was one very good move that he made, and that was picking up Sean Couturier in the draft. I just want to talk about this a little bit because ever since he's come back, he's been dynamite. Steve, you said that you think he's one of the best players in the NHL. I tend to agree with you now. It's really been a pleasure to watch him grow and develop throughout the course of his NHL career since he came up in the 11-12 season up through where we are right now. And it was kind of touch and go for a little bit. There were a few years where I think a lot of the fan base didn't really know.
He was playing with Zach Ronaldo and Max Talbot. That was all bullshit to begin with. Fuck those fans.
Agreed.
What Couturier could have been.
Well, we all realize it now, and
we're here.
Yeah, he's been absolutely awesome for us, and just continues to produce in the offensive end, continues to play great. Do a great job with the back check, and really just be one of the best two-way forwards, as evidenced by the Selke Trophy that he won last year. Steve, do you have any thoughts on Couturier? Anything that you want to talk about there?
He's the glue to get everything going right for the offense. I think, the past couple of years it's been, hey, this guy's struggling, throw him on the line with Couturier, they bounce back. Now, it has been entirely working out that way because the whole team has been doing, off and on their own outside of JVR. But Couturier also, he gets back, he plays, one game, and then we get delayed with COVID. And then he comes back, kind of, rests him again, and then he just goes back to being his Selke-worthy self. And it helps everyone throughout the lineup. It helps Hayes take on a little bit of a lesser competition. It helps the fourth line, Connor Bunneman, just to kind of really grind down other teams, which he does pretty well. And then the Lawton line right now, it just alleviates the pressure on the other three lines. And then knowing that Couturier can be out there in every situation, anytime, usually in the crunch time at the very end of games. And you could just, I trust him with the world, basically. And he can do no wrong in my mind.
Yeah, he's been so good. And it's just been so much fun to watch him develop as a player, just become the absolute force that he is right now. It's awesome to see, and I think we can only expect more of that going forward. So really excited to see where things lead with Sean Couturier. But Bork, you mentioned we were talking about Mark Friedman for a little bit, and that brings me to some of the guys that we have currently down in Lehigh Valley right now. You've had a chance to actually cover the Phantoms a little bit this season. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you've seen from them?
Yeah, well, thus far, other than when obviously they're playing similar to the Flyers, one particular team, the Phantoms have been a pretty damn good team, other than don't tell them to play a team, well, Hershey they're not great against, but don't tell them to play Wilkes-Barre. And then now we're going up against Hershey, and I think they'll have a pretty good game against the Capitals minor league opponent. That'll be the next game I'm covering tomorrow. But it's amazing how well an underager, the 18-year-old Zade Wisdom that we picked in the 4th round, of course, this past year, is performing with first-round picks. Like Seth Jarvis is leading the league in goals, who the Hurricanes, of course, drafted. And then Wisdom and Willman are right behind him. So you have two guys. I believe Willman, if I remember correctly, was a 4th for the Sabres years ago, and then we picked him up to an AHL contract. He played for Reading last year, too. Him and Wisdom have been the carrying weights of the Phantoms, and both are technically rookies because Willman played literally one game below what it takes to qualify to be a actual AHL player for that season last season after he came up from Reading. So it was really funny how that played out, but he's playing amazing. All their veterans are playing amazing. Zane McIntyre, who was struggling against Boston, but screw you, Boston, because we took one of your AHL goalies, and now he's one of the best AHL goalies still with us. So, at least we got something going over them. He's performing like one of the best with a .914 save percentage and 4-1-1 this far with one shutout also. So
another notch in the Flyers goaltending belt right now.
Yeah, literally just another guy. Sandstrom, I thought, didn't look bad, where Bellavier, I think is how you say the name of the player that scored against him on the opposing rush for Wilkes-Barre. I think he would have made that save if he was in a groove, because goaltenders are all about routine, obviously, and actually practice, just like pitchers in baseball, where he didn't play since the preseason because he was on our taxi squad forever. So I think if he was in a groove, he would have looked better, but it's just great to steal somebody from the Bruins minor leagues, which they do have Vladar, who's great, but you still stole one of the AHL's best goalies. He was performing great over there. They just gave him up on the premise of saying, we don't need this kid anymore. And then he's still performing like a bat out of hell over here. And I just love when you steal somebody from the Bruins of all teams. So those would be my top three performers. I think Wyatt Wiley, there's so many W's on this team, honestly, has performed pretty well as an underager that they drafted as a later round pick. Hogberg's been good. Logan Day, that they picked up through the AHL and an AHL contract, has looked good, but he got injured, unfortunately. And then as soon as he came back, LeBurge, who was in the same draft as O'Brien, who's doing really well in Boston now, scored a goal, but then unfortunately he got hit on a weird play and then got injured on a play that wasn't even that noticeable when you were watching the game. But then I saw somebody tweet about it, so it seemed like he got banged up again. But when he's healthy, he seems to be very skilled. It's just all health with him, and hopefully he doesn't become our Roman Quinn guy that has skill but can never kind of put it together because he can't stay healthy. But I think they got a lot going right for them in Lehigh, and it's just exciting to see all these guys develop, especially when it comes to a guy like Wisdom being one of the best AHL players when he ain't even supposed to be in the AHL. They had to fudge the rules this year due to the fact of the juniors not being back. And the closing point is they got to make a decision on him soon. He might end up getting a cup of coffee with the Flyers soon if they don't want him to go back to the AHL, because if he's murdering the AHL, why would they want him to go back to the OHL? He's just going to he's going to make those people look like toddlers. Yeah, he's making the AHL look like they're teenagers. If he goes back to the OHL, he's going to make them look like toddlers.
Yeah, but from my understanding of the cap, if they give him, the 9 games in the NHL, then he can't play in the AHL after that. He would have to go NHL or bust, right? I know it's kind of different with the COVID this year. Because I don't know.
I think so, yeah. They do have an emergency, what's called an emergency basis, keeping someone up on an emergency basis this year, where that rule is kind of a loophole, but I think you would have to have a good reasoning for why you would want to keep them up. So, like, by the actual rules, you're right. You would have to put them back down or keep them in the NHL at that point, and then a Raffle or somebody would probably be snubbed out of your lineup if he's actually performing, even if Raffle's performing, because you're going to want to keep in a young player that's performing.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, I would assume. I haven't been able to really watch him outside of the highlights, but it is very exciting to see the stat line and, how he's getting these points in bunches. But I think that they would most likely send him back to the OHL, maybe give him, a game or two with the Flyers. But then I think he would be a guarantee next year to maybe, really get a shot. I also think that with players like him and Jarvis doing extremely well, Jarvis leads the AHL in points, I believe you just said. I think they might start to reevaluate this age restriction for the AHL. And I hope they do, because some of these guys, they're just too good. Overagers or, these high picks that can't be in the NHL, they have to go back.
We will answer some of the fan mail that we have coming in here. We had a few questions that we answered a couple shows ago, and we had a few left over. So Boric and I, we will answer these two while Steve's not around. The first question that we have here from Ashley in Jersey. If you could pick one former Flyer from any era to be on this year's team, who would it be? Boric, do you have an answer for that?
Oh, that's actually a really loaded question because I just watch so much. Like, I love so many guys from different eras. I'm just going to go with a guy that I think would just fit in so well with any era, and that's one of our former GMs himself, Bobby Clark. I mean, Bobby Clark, I think, can play in any era. He's a great skilled player, can do whatever the hell you want him to do, and obviously can kick your ass if you want him to kick someone's ass too, obviously coming from that era. So I think having him would just add to the great veteran leadership we already have on this team with JVR, Jake, G, and others. Obviously Provy's a veteran now, so I think somebody like Clarkie would be a guy for me.
Yeah, it's obviously a good choice. I mean, he was the best player on those two teams that won Stanley Cups in back-to-back years.
Oh, yeah.
One of the best players in hockey history, so it's really hard to argue against that. However, given the Flyers' forward situation and how deep they are, I think the more pressing issue is having a guy to shore up the defense. So my pick will be Eric Desjardins. One of the best all-around defenseman, I think, in the whole NHL during the prime of his career in the 90s and the early 2000s. Just a really important player to have along, not only great on the ice, but a great locker room guy off the ice as well, and a veteran presence who was always kind of a stabilizing presence when he is out there on the ice. I think that just given his intangibles, Eric Desjardins will be a huge addition to this year's Flyers team. I'm talking, well, obviously prime years Eric Desjardins, but if they could have a guy like him, I think that would be
Bundy. If I remember correctly, my memory, obviously I would be like 6 or 5 when watching this, but was he the one that was teamed with Terrian sometimes as when Terrian was on the team?
Yes, he was.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought he was partnered with him for a bit. Because it's funny you brought him up as your guy, because my friend, he's a guy that I loved watching too, because my friend had a big-ass poster in his room. It was like one of those Fathead, before Fatheads existed, size like actual posters that was on his wall of Eric Desjardins that looked like he was skating right at your face as it was the picture on the wall. So, yeah, he was a great player too that teamed well with Bundy, who, by the way, is doing great things for people in Philly now. There's a good article in the paper around about him that I would check out for people if they haven't. But I think that's a guy. I don't know why the hell I remembered he was teamed with him because that was years ago, but that was one of my first guys.
Bundy was the guy who was tasked with slowing down Jaromir Jagr every time they played against the Penguins. So they would have that pairing out there, and it was usually Bundy matched one-on-one with Jagr out there.
That's true. That's a good point. That could be why. I mean, I remember that as a kid, you would always hear them talk about how Terrian would step up a lot against Pittsburgh, and a big credit would go to how good Eric Desjardins makes a guy on his line better around him, as you were saying. So those are definitely two good players. I had Clarkie and you had Eric Desjardins. You can't go wrong with one as a center, and you definitely can't go wrong with the other as a defender. So
absolutely. And moving on to our second question here. Derek in Lansdale asks, what's the best game you've ever been to? I'm assuming he means Flyers games, so obviously that's the answer we're going to go with here. So, Boric, what's the best Flyers game that you've ever been to?
I would say probably just because of the atmosphere, the 50th anniversary game that I went to. It felt like you were in the middle of like Times Square during New Year's Day, honestly. Like, I can't even remember exactly. I think I remember we won that game, but I don't remember the entire result because like you were just taken back in that game by just how overly packed the Wells Fargo Center was, where you just had people standing in places that they probably were not legally supposed to be standing in. Like, that's how packed it was for that. The atmosphere was just great with that game. And it was just a very fun game because I was by the goal we shot at twice. I got very expensive seats for that game because it was the 50th anniversary and got to see where we shot at twice. So that was from the aura and ambiance and experience. I would say it was probably our 50th anniversary game where I was taken back by how great the experience was itself that I don't even entirely remember the result of that game in itself just because of how great the experience was.
Yeah, how great the fan experience was. Yeah. I'm actually going to go with a game that's from that same season, and it was during that 10-game winning streak. Now, obviously, everyone remembers how the Flyers were, I believe, the only team to have a 10-game winning streak and miss the playoffs. But yeah, they had that 10-game winning streak, and one of those games during that was a back and forth tilt against Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers. And I was sat down, probably, my buddy and I were probably about 5 to 6 rows up off the ice in the Flyer sheet twice. And so we had great seats, just like you did for your game. And yeah, we spent a lot of money for it. It was totally worth it. McDavid had a goal for Edmonton. I think he might have had two actually in that game, if I remember correctly. But the Flyers twice came back. They were down, I believe it was 3-1, and they came back and took or they came back and tied the game, I believe. And then they were down again 5-3, came back and tied it again. And then Michael Raffl at the very end with just over a minute left in regulation came in on a partial breakaway and had kind of a Bobby Orr style goal where he scored the goal and they went flying. It was a game-winning goal. Put them up 6-5 with just over a minute left, and that place is just absolutely rocking when he scored that goal because I think it pushed the winning streak to, I want to say it was like 8 or 9 games at that point, and they won a couple more before the streak came to an end. But at that point, everyone was real high on the Flyers because they were winning, and that back and forth game with the Raffl winning goal at the end, it was just an awesome experience. So that was maybe not my favorite. I think I would say my favorite game I've been to was the Pittsburgh Game 3 back in 2012, but I've mentioned that too many times in other episodes, so I'm going to go with this one, 6-5 win against Edmonton in that 50th anniversary season as my choice for my favorite game that I've been to. The final question that we have here, Tony in Exton, do you believe the Flyers are currently a top 5 team in the NHL?
I would say probably just right there if they are. I think we would probably at this point, just because you see more consistency in one health, which you can't do anything about that, obviously. But and so on and so forth, you see more consistency from the two Florida teams and Toronto somehow, who's finally become very consistent. I would say they're probably fifth because I think we have a team that can beat Washington, and we have a team that can beat when push comes to snuff the Canes because we have the better goaltending when push comes to snuff, in my opinion, for a series length. So I think it's going to be we're either right at 5 or like the 6th team right now. So I would say we're right there because I would say the top 4 are probably like you have Toronto, the 2 Florida teams right now, and Carolina. And then teams like Washington, I think we can beat. Boston, we would have to figure out a chance to beat. But I would say right at the 5th spot or about right outside looking in. So I would say right on the fence or right at that 5th spot.
See, I'm going to do you two better here. I'm going to say that they're the 3rd best team in the NHL. I would put Tampa ahead of them, and I would put Boston ahead of them. Florida, obviously, off to a great start. I just think they don't have it to compete at that same level throughout the whole season. I think the Flyers are, I don't want to say head and shoulders above Washington, but I think that when things come to a head at the end of the year, I think the Flyers will be above the Capitals in the standings, and I think they'll be able to perform the way that they did in their first game against the Capitals, beating them 7-4. I think that they'll be able to perform that way in their future games against them as well. Toronto, yeah, they've played very well, and they obviously deserve to be where they are in the standings. I don't see their game translating to the playoffs. And we've seen it in years past where they've had great regular seasons and then get bounced in the first round of the playoffs. I do think the Flyers are a better all-around team than the Maple Leafs are. So I will put them ahead of Toronto. And teams out west, obviously Colorado is a very good team. Vegas has been playing very well. They had an exciting win last night over the Minnesota Wild. I always felt that Eastern Conference teams, when it comes down to it, are better all around than the Western Conference teams are. I think they're a little bit more physical. a little bit more well-rounded between both offense and defense. I think that the Flyers, I would put them ahead of those teams. So, yeah, the only two teams that I have ahead of the Flyers will be Tampa and Boston. I have the Flyers being the third best team in the NHL right now.
Yeah,
So,
well, if we're talking about projecting, then I could put them. I'm talking about if we're going based off of this question, regular season. I would agree with you. I don't think any team in Canada is really positioning themselves well for the postseason because they're very running gun and nobody's very defensive. But in terms of who's the best now in the regular season, that's why I would say they're right at the fifth spot or right on the outside looking in because teams like Toronto and both Florida franchises have actually looked more consistent than us this far, and that's because of unforeseen things. But a couple of those clubs, like Carolina, for example, has had a lot of unforeseen things too, and then worked through them. So we've had as well. That's why I would say we're still in the top five. I would say we're probably more at five or right about to make five once we win this Pittsburgh series, since we went on a little skid not playing as good of hockey before we really were able to bounce back against Buffalo.
well, yeah, and I am going off of what we've seen so far and where we're at right now, actually. I think that a level of competition is something that needs to be considered. The Flyers, I would say, are playing in the toughest division in hockey, and they've had a lot of success against teams not named Boston. The North Division, really, Montreal, now that Montreal's fallen off, Edmonton, they are what they are. They're okay, but they're not great. I think that Toronto, I don't want to say that they have it easy in that division, but they certainly don't have it as tough as the other divisions do. Now, the division that Tampa is in with Carolina and, with Florida as well, that's a tough division. They've done well in that, but I think that this East division that the Flyers are in, when it comes down to it, between them, Boston, Pittsburgh, and Washington, I would say the top end of that division, the top end competition there is tougher than the other divisions. And even teams like the Rangers and the Islanders, who aren't playing great this season, but can tune up their game and play at a high level at times. I think that this is the toughest division in the Flyers. As I said, outside of playing Boston, I played pretty well in it.
Yeah, the only team that really is not usually very competitive at all in our division that just doesn't compete in games is the team we just swept in two shutouts, which is Buffalo. So I agree with you in that they do have a pretty tough division. I don't want to also get ahead of myself because I like being a guy that's optimistic, but I like to call myself a cautious optimist because then I have a better chance of staying optimistic, if you get my drift, because then I'm like, okay, I think we're at about five now, so then if we start doing what you say, I'm like, perfect, we're doing even better than I anticipated. So it just makes it even better. So, like, that's a hint to when we do our chasing the pennant, what I probably predict the Phillies as. Definitely not going to go bold on that. But, yeah, when it comes to this, I think we're right at five now, but we're definitely teetering upward because you got back-to-back shutouts. If you can take 2 out of 3 from Pittsburgh Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, it'll be interesting to see what we do with the goaltenders. But if you can take 2 out of 3, that would be huge. And then I think we would definitely be more in the 3 spot for sure, like you were saying.
Okay, so we've only got a couple minutes left here, realistically about 3 minutes left. Bork, you got any final thoughts you want to add in for our listeners?
My only final thought is literally just stay aggressive, play the game you played against Buffalo, keep getting pucks on net. It's going to be more impressive to get the shot total because the one thing the Penguins do a decent job at is actually being top 10 in limiting shots on goal, where the Flyers are in the bottom 10 in that. So but hopefully we're able to limit our shots more, protect our goalies better like we did against Buffalo, stay aggressive. I think Hart and Elliott, whatever game you give him, both of them are going to step up. Moose has stepped up every game as far, and Hart seemed to get back into the zone. He talked about how he was just having fun again and really loose before the game. I think that was the key. He just wasn't mentally zoned in, and I know you talked about that, Rob, before. So now that we have both of our goalies, I think, in my opinion, in the zone, you're going to be able to win at least 2 out of these 3, and I'm hoping the other game goes into overtime so you get at least 5 out of the 6 point. from Pittsburgh, and then you're really sitting pretty and at the third place spot in the entire league, maybe even second if you get 5 out of 6 at that point, depending how some of these other teams do. And you're really sitting good at that point. So I'm really excited going into this series. You're not playing a full-fledged Pittsburgh team, but I'm looking for us to take advantage like we did while Eichel was out. So I think that's something we have to see and take advantage of a weaker team again, and a team that only has 2 lines when we have 4 very productive lines.
Yeah, absolutely agreed with that. And nonetheless, it'll be fun hockey to watch because it always is when the Flyers play against the Penguins, and getting 3 straight games against them, we could see things to kind of start to get a little bit chippy and emotional as well. So that'll be.
We could all have heart attacks too by playing Pittsburgh for 3 straight games.
It'll be fun to watch, that is for certain. I just want to give a shout out to the sponsor of our show, Just Food. Awesome stuff, great food. You will love everything that they have on their menu. You can reach them by phone at 215-794-3663. That's 215-794-FOOD. They are located in Buckingham, Pennsylvania. That is in Buckingham Green off of York Road. Their owner, Asian Rob, a really awesome, great friend of the Always Next to Your Podcast Network. Once again, just really good stuff. If you're looking for food for game day, or if you're just looking to go in and grab a bite, they have anything that you want. I highly, highly recommend it. Love going there myself. Once again, Just Food, 215-794-3663. That is 215-794-FOOD. Located in Buckingham, Pennsylvania, in Buckingham Green. We thank you for listening to this episode of The Disciples of Ed. We'll be back with another one next week.
I used to be revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.